Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. Brian Schuff joined in studio across the table. It's been a few weeks since she joined us. Meat scientist Diana Clark. How are you?
I'm doing pretty great today, actually.
Fantastic. You know, we are going to tackle a topic that I know has been, it's one that we've wanted to do for a while. It's been on the radar, and I think we do a lot of episodes about meat science, and you know, fingers crossed, all are helpful to our folks listening.
I hope so.
You know, but this is one that I think is really going to be an eye opener for some. And we're talking today about the idea of frozen beef.
Yes.
And you know, if you rewind almost a calendar year, when there were issues with product getting through plants to get to retail stores, we saw a lot of frozen product that was out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had, I don't know if concerns was the right word, but they worried that the quality was not going to be there. You've done a lot of work in your day-to-day tasks as the meat scientist here at Certified Angus Beef that would suggest otherwise.
Yes, it's so funny. There's a lot of marketing behind it. So we think there's a lot of companies that say, you know, fresh, never frozen. That is kind of like their tagline. So people automatically think, well, if they're really promoting this fresh thing, then frozen's got to be bad. But there's nothing wrong with frozen beef. And I should say that when done properly, there's nothing wrong with it. And that's the key. And I think everyone has in their brain of freezing beef from what their parents did. So they go to the store, they buy that overwrap chuck roast. And when I say overwrap, I mean it's in that styrofoam tray. It's got that plastic wrap on top. And then what do? You just put it in your freezer because you're not going to use it that week. Okay, that's the bad way to do it for multiple reasons. So one, you still have all that air in there. So when you put it in the freezer, the likelihood of developing freezer burn is very, very high. You want to make sure you have a vacuum packaged bag. And that's really, there's been more of a push at that at retail stores. And I think a lot of consumers are a little bit leery of it because it changes the color of the meat when it's presented. So when oxygen is available, so that would be in that overwrap type presence, or if it's just sitting there in the fresh case, the meat is that bright cherry red. That's what everyone looks for in beef. But when that oxygen is removed, it turns to more of a purple color. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the state of that myoglobin, or the oxygen carrier in muscle. So when they see those vacuum packaged bags, they think, oh, that's really old meat. And actually, it's probably not old, but it's actually going to be pretty good if it's been aged. And then you could take it and put it right in your freezer. And we've actually been working on that from a consumer research side of kind of saying freezer ready beef when it's in that package. So then consumers know they can just simply put it in. They don't need to worry about buying a food saver or anything like that. They can just put it in their freezer, vacuum packaged. So that's step one. Make sure that it's sealed appropriately. If you don't have a food saver, another way that you could do that is actually just take a pot of water, and it doesn't have to be hot water or anything, but you put meat in a Ziploc bag and drop that piece in the water. All the air is going to come up, and you can seal it so that it's going to kind of keep that nice and tight.
That's a pro tip.
Yes.
I would not recommend using the Ziploc and suck the air out of the bag with your mouth.
It never works. I mean, really, you try it 100 times, you still have air in it. So this is the easiest way to get that moving. And I like the food saver. I think is totally worth it. I know that some people have issues with the cost of the bags, and they can get expensive. But if you're looking for an alternative, that's definitely an option. Or you can just go for a full-blown vacuum packager, which, I mean, it's very conveniently located at our meat lab, so we use that quite often. It's also good for vacuum packaging clothes, too, if you ever need to, put stuff away.
Save some space.
Yes.
Huh?
But, so the main reason you're doing that is just to get all that air and oxygen out. And then the next step would be to make sure that you're freezing it fast. So never kind of stack steaks on top of each other. Try to lay them as flat as possible in the coldest part of your freezer. I know that's a little bit harder at home to do, but you can hit the right spot. Like, so for instance, we have a walk-in freezer in our culinary center. We have fans that are at the top. So a lot of times I will actually just take steaks and lay them flat on a tray and put them closer to the fans because I know they're going to freeze faster. That is the goal, is a fast freeze. Now your big distributors, and they're freezing beef like instantly. They call it blast freezing. And so they're just dropping those temperatures really fast and is making sure the integrity of the product is there. Now, the reason why this is key is we have to think about muscle. So muscle is 70 to 75% water. You got a lot of water in there. Well, let's think about what happens to water when it freezes. Turns to ice, okay? So we have these ice crystals forming. Well, if you think about muscle, then we get down to molecular level. You have your intra and intercellular water. So you have water within the cell, water on the outside of the cell. And the goal is for that to freeze kind of all at once versus the outside freezing before the inside. So when you freeze slowly, that intercellular water is going to start to freeze, and it actually pokes holes in the cell itself. And then you actually will have these holes being poked, and the intracellular water will then have the ability to maybe escape later during the thaw process.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really key to freeze fast. So you're still going to get holes being poked within the muscle, but they're going to be small, because by the time that freezes, the intracellular water is going to freeze as well. So it makes it pretty simple. Okay. Then the thawing process, you want to make sure you thaw slow, because the muscle actually has the ability to kind of absorb some of that water. So if you picture it like you got this big bucket of water and you have a funnel. When you thaw slowly, you have a larger funnel to take in that water. When you thaw really fast, you put it in your sink, okay, or something along the lines of, you're going to basically be taking a big bucket and dumping it onto a really small funnel. And so you're going to lose more water. You'll have more purge in that bag. So it's really key to thaw slow, put it in the refrigerator, let it go. I know sometimes it's very inconvenient because you forgot that you're supposed to pull that roast out or steak out. I've done it. It's not going to kill you. It's not a food safety issue.
No.
It's just a food quality issue. So really you can do either way. But if you're an establishment and you're trying to do it an appropriate way to get your guests to continue to come back, thaw slow. Don't put it in the sink.
So yeah, I was going to say, so when you talk about slow, can you make that picture a little clearer? Does that mean slow over, if we're talking a whole export rib, are you talking over days? Are you talking over a week? Are you talking 24 hours? What does slow mean?
Yeah, that export rib, you want to do it at a refrigerated temperature, so between that 29 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So that will probably take a couple of days, 2 to 3 days, and sometimes it might take you a little bit longer, but usually 2 to 3 days you'll be good. So usually if I need product for the next week, I'll set it out in the cooler. If I need it on Tuesday, I'll put it out Friday to know that I'll be safe and it will be ready to go. And we even have an event next Thursday, and I'm going to set out, I've got a whole chuck roll that's frozen. I'm actually going to set it out on Friday. I know that's going to be ample time for it to thaw and be ready to go. So it's kind of planning a little bit a week ahead almost to make sure that the bigger the product, the longer it's going to take, but that's going to be the best bang for your buck, so to speak.
Yeah, and you guys have gone to the extent of, you've tried these side by side in the name of science.
Yes.
Right? And the end product, when you thaw correctly, indistinguishable?
Yes, and it's actually amazing. So we've had a lot of international guests that come, and a lot of times they have to receive frozen product, but they think in their head, it's just not as good. If anyone has ever tasted those side by side, a fresh, never frozen, and then your actual frozen product, it cooks the same. There's no difference there. It tastes the same. And from a science standpoint, your frozen product can be more tender, to be quite honest, because we think about those water poking holes in the cells and everything in the muscle structure. You're breaking it down and making it more tender. The easiest way to think about this, if any of you, I'm sure that you have at one point, have frozen a carrot or some type of vegetable like that, that's got a lot of sturdiness to it, but then you put it in the freezer, you thaw it out, and think of it, it's like a cooked carrot then. It's lost all structural integrity because carrots have moisture in it, and that moisture turned into ice crystals, and the ice crystals broke down the structure, and now you have a tender carrot. It's the exact same concept. And if you haven't done it, try it. It's really easy. A bag of carrots is 98 cents maybe, and you could take one of those carrots and leave it out, and the other one put in your freezer, let it sit for a day, and then the next day pull it out, let it thaw. and you'll see differences.
Yeah.
You'll see some differences in color too. Frozen beef is going to have a little bit of an off color, and that's again from those ice crystals denaturing, again, that myoglobin, because myoglobin is really connected to color. Still nothing is wrong with it. So just as long as you do that quick frozen, slow thaw, you're good to go.
Interesting. So, yeah, key takeaway, I mean, it comes down to handling, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're doing it right, quick freeze and the blast freezers are one of man's greatest. Because that's the places where like you can throw like a cup of water in the air. It's amazing. Right? We get about 3 days each year in Ohio that end up being like that outside. So, and then people try it on the gram and they throw boiling water up in the air and it blows back in. I mean, and it's not. Yeah, you get some ER visits from that. Let's turn the page a little bit. We've talked about freezing in general, but let's talk about freezing in relation to the aging process, because it's something to really consider, is the idea of can you dry age frozen product? Can you wet age something that's already been frozen? I guess those are some of the topics just to understand. When I like to think of dry aging or aging in general, and I'm preaching to the choir here, of course, with you, the enzymes within the meat over time are breaking it down, making it more tender.
Yeah.
But what happens when you freeze it?
So when you freeze it, if you think about, let's think about chemistry class when you're in high school. The whole point of, and you're doing those reactions, you have a Bunsen burner. And the whole point in that, it wasn't to light other things on fire and have it be fun. It was actually to speed up the reaction so you could get it done in a 50-minute period. Because when you add heat to something, it makes things go faster. Okay, so those enzymes in the meat, they react better at warmer temperatures. Okay, but so that refrigerated temperature being our warm temperature that they're moving. Now, when we get so cold that we've frozen things, those enzymes, I don't want to say die, but they essentially stop working. There's been some research that shows they can maybe at a limited level come back very low, but it's still more than anything they are done after it's been frozen. So you want to make sure before you freeze your meat, you get all the aging you want out of that product. Don't take a strip loin that's been aged 7 days and throw it in the freezer. You need to make sure you get a minimum of 21 days on it, if not more, 35 days. And the beauty of that too, you lose that purge loss. So that's less of that water freezing inside the muscle itself, so less of that potential moisture loss from the thawing process. And then you can capitalize again on just that freezing, the quality process there. So always, always, always age the meat before you freeze it. Now, dry aging, okay? So you aged it, you wet aged it, you froze the meat. So now you can't really wet age it anymore because the only really added value of wet aging is more tenderness. Well, you've just inhibited those enzymes from working, so you can't get any more tenderness from that way. However, if you pull that meat out of that vacuum package bag, and you usually dry it off a little bit, and you stick it in a dry age cooler, you will have water evaporate, and you can add some of that funky dry age flavor to the meat. And we actually have quite a few international customers that do this because, again, they have to receive their product frozen. So they just take it out of the bag, they let it thaw, they'll wipe it off, put it in their dry age cooler, and you'll have some of that moisture evaporate, you'll have those surfaces harden, and there you go. You got a dry age product. So you really can still dry age. You're not going to get that added tenderness. You might get some added tenderness from the mold itself growing because some of those molds actually can break down collagen. And so you might get some added tenderness there, but from the actual enzymes itself, you won't. But it still is totally possible to do.
Interesting. So you're really taking that as we would think of your standard dry aging process, still doing all the same steps, but it's broken apart. So you've already let the enzymes do their thing, then you freeze it, but then even though you can't resuscitate those enzymes when you thaw it, you can impart the funk, you can impart the other stuff that's going on, the dehydration as well. So you still end up with the same end point.
Yes.
It all comes down to handling.
Yeah. And to me, that's the beauty of frozen product is you get to really capitalize on the seasonality of beef. So everyone knows that beef ribs, beef tenderloins go extremely high in the wintertime because everyone wants to cook prime rib. Everyone wants to have a roasted tenderloin for the holidays. Well, there are other points in the year where those prices are low. So it's great to jump on and grab those then. I mean, you could buy, usually in September, you can buy ribs for a really good price. And you could let those age for 60 days and then throw them in your freezer, and you're ready to go for the holidays.
Yeah.
You've bought low and while prices are really high. Especially now, the market right now is very variable. It's not really on schedule to what things are. And prices, I have to say right now, are high, unseasonably high too. But I think with where these prices are at, we had so many people trying to buy out for ahead of time that they went up. But we're going to see some lows dipping. And I would really recommend trying to jump on that when these prices do start to drop, because you don't know what the summer's going to bring. I mean, right now our strip prices are high. Hopefully they'll drop down a little bit. But usually it picks back up in the middle of summer because that's when people are grilling. So it's trying to plan out a little bit ahead, but then you could really capitalize on that investment later. And again, if it's done properly, if you're a chef, if you're working with your distributor, talk to them about that ahead of time, because they have the freezer space. I get that you might not, but they do. And they'd be willing to step through that program with you and even go through how they freeze and how they thaw. It's really neat to see some of the processes that people put in place for it too.
Excellent. Let's talk about inventory management.
Yeah.
Right. So we've talked about, and Diana's great because I get to throw out all of my what about this? What about this? Even really dumb stuff. Right. But you've always been, and I remember even as a kid, you were always told once you thawed something out, don't refreeze it. So if you are in a restaurant, if you are banking, you've got your freezer stocked, you're slacking out your product. If you slack out too much, not a good idea to still go back and refreeze it. But why?
So from a food safety standpoint, completely safe to refreeze. It's not going to hurt you or anything like that. You might have more potential for issues just because you're exposing it to different temperatures and all of that, but really should be safe as long as it's kept in that vacuum package bag. However, from a food quality standpoint, now we go back to those ice crystals. So it was already frozen once, so it already popped holes in that intercellular water. Kind of some of it might have got out a little bit. Well, now you're going to be introducing more holes to break into that. And it will make the product more tender for sure, because the more you freeze it, but you're also probably going to lose some moisture. So you could think about it, and maybe in your cooking application, what you're doing with it can really change of, am I really okay with refreezing this? If it's a steak, I would say no. Okay, you're going to lose too much moisture. Now, if it's a steak that you usually serve with gravy and mushrooms on top of, or you bread it and fry it and then put gravy on, it's probably going to be okay, and people really aren't going to notice. But just from a quality standpoint, you want to make sure that people are having the highest quality meal. I would freeze it once and thaw it once, and that's it. Now, have I definitely frozen something, thawed it, and then thrown it back in the freezer? Yeah, actually, just last week I did that because I set out some sausages. I thought I was going to eat it. Then I ended up not having it, and so we put it back in. And I said, I'll have it in a few weeks. So it's completely fine to do at home. Like, don't worry about it too much, especially when you're looking into ground product, because you've already really disturbed all those cells and everything. And when you think about sausages specifically,
I think about sausages all the time.
Yes. You have that meat emulsion. So in that emulsion, you're binding fat and water and protein. So you should be able to hold on to more water even in that freezing process. But it's still just from a quality standpoint, just easier to remember, okay, I'm just going to freeze once, thaw once, keep it good at that.
Yeah.
And some people might ask, okay, so what if I buy a frozen strip loin that's been frozen? They thawed it out. I cut it into steaks. Now can I freeze those steaks? Again, you can, but that's going to be freezing twice. So don't count that as one freeze for you. It was already frozen before, so you're going to try to want to use that product. So if you are buying whole subprimals in that were previously frozen, just plan on using them, having them ready to go for that week, essentially.
Excellent. When you hear, and we all know, it's been well established that I love the fast food, right? Right. I know sometimes people who are, running certified Angus beef, probably some of the ranchers out there, like, man, I wish that guy wouldn't talk about fast food so much. But it's delicious. There is a certain fast food restaurant. We'll just say it's named after a red-haired girl with pigtails. Started in Ohio, right? About an hour and a half south from us. they've always promoted fresh, never frozen beef.
Yes.
Why? I guess why given all this information would we make that claim?
I honestly think it's just a way to separate themselves from the rest in the market. And I could see I would say, like, if I was marketing, but it'd be really hard to say this message to consumers. I think a lot of fast food places, they probably have pre-cooked burgers that are coming in, and all they're doing is heating them up. So, like, for instance, I worked at Sara Lee for a little bit. So Hillshire Farms, Ballpark Frank, all that. We actually made hamburger patties that we cooked, froze, and boxed and sold. So they were already ready. I mean, it was really neat machine. It was all done on one little conveyor belt. It spit out these patties, and it went in and cooked them. And then under the same exact belt, it froze them, and they came out these little hockey pucks, like ready to go.
Yeah.
So you have that kind of that process. So in my head, if I said to a consumer, okay, these are never cooked before burgers, and now they're at your door, it's like, wait, what do you mean they're never cooked? Why would they be cooked? They should be cooked if I'm eating them. So I think they were probably trying to deliver the message of, we're cooking these in-house, here you go.
Yeah.
Versus, okay, this has never been frozen and we have all this fresh patty. It sounds really good to the customer. They're just the word fresh.
Yeah.
And I have a strong feeling they did a lot of research on that term fresh itself before they rolled out with it. But
yeah,
it makes sense just to.
It's good to know. And for the record, just in case somebody from Wendy's hears this, I love you guys.
Yeah, I mean,
I love the Dave's Double. And if you are the person who famously runs Wendy's social media accounts, I want to make sure I stay on your good side because I've seen what you can do. So that's it, right? Also, there is an episode, if you are in the mood of going back through and catching some of the stuff from season 1, we sat down with our pal Rick Tremano, who Rick actually was, his first cooking job was actually with Dave Thomas at
that's
Rochester.
so
Yeah,
cool.
It's amazing. So he can tell you all about the square patties and all that. So Wendy's, nothing but love for you.
Yes.
Just had to ask the question.
And we, as being in Ohio, we actually know a lot of people that have either worked with Wendy's or work there now. It's a great company. You know, they do really well. They have a huge beef program too, so I know a lot of people that work from them under that belt. But yeah, I mean, all love. There's just different forms.
I was actually at the packing plant in I think it was Tyson, Amarillo. They have a whole wing just for Wendy's burgers.
For Wendy's
All they
burgers.
make off the line are square patties. It's
my
it's
gosh.
mesmerizing. So yeah, that's it, right? That's my full disclosure, right?
Yeah.
We work for Certified Angus Beef. We also love everything, right?
There's good food out there. You know,
right?
it all falls into different categories. I mean,
That's right. Yeah, you're good.
but yeah, there's there's different. You just got to remember the marketing behind everything. I mean, and it's not that they're trying to trick you. I don't want to say that about Wendy's or anything like that. They don't want to do anything, but they're trying to convey a message to you to understand that they're putting in the extra mile to make sure that it is fresh beef, that it is being cooked in store, so it's prepared right there for you. Okay, but so you just need to understand the science behind some of this stuff, and don't fear it. I mean, don't think about your grandparents, your parents freezing beef in your freezer. You know that's bad. And also, so the USDA does recommend that you only go a year on frozen product too. And that, again, that's from a quality standpoint specifically. I've definitely, especially during this whole COVID thing, man, we found some old meat in our freezer, but we definitely ate it, okay? We had to make sure we got through everything in that freezer. But you do want to try to stick to, if you're an establishment selling, try to stick to that year mark. But it's not going to, again, from a food safety standpoint, it's still okay to go past a year, but just try to stick to that year from a quality standpoint.
Excellent. Well said. So I guess in conclusion, I mean, if you go back a calendar year, of course it was, COVID was at the very beginning. I think it was late spring when we started to see some of the major packing plants slow down, right? Because workers, they needed to quarantine. Yeah. The chain speed of production slowed down from the rancher all the way into retail stores. But I will say, and it's probably a message that didn't get put out there nearly as loudly as some of the other messages, was a lot of folks we've talked to have said it wasn't even necessarily that there was a shortage issue. It was that there was a demand issue because people were understandably so, in a little bit of hysterics, right? Stocking up. Obviously, we've been down the toilet paper, road a few times. But the one thing that everybody I've talked to said was out there was plenty of frozen product available. So if we are in that case again, I hope the biggest takeaway that folks listening take away from this is, don't fear the frozen, right?
Yes, do not. I mean, it's still good. It's still good quality. It's still, especially when you're buying it in a grocery store, guys, they're doing it right. They're going to make sure that they freeze it the best way possible, because they want you to come back and eat it again. They want you to try it and say, wow, this was good. So they're going to make sure that it's high quality. And as someone that's worked in R&D before, I promise you, we test every single scenario that a consumer could possibly do to make sure that the eating satisfaction is there. And that's really the key behind it, is really trust the meat industry. I mean, they're really just trying to get you the best quality all the time. So if you do have this high demand and all of a sudden meat seems scarce, don't fear the frozen section. There's still a lot available there. And it's really awesome to see during that time how we did just keep having. I mean, we're such a fortunate country. I think people were afraid that we ran out of meat, but we really didn't. I mean, maybe at your grocery store, but if you went to the grocery store that's across the street, we have that luxury here, and we had meat. Like there was you could go to a restaurant and they had meat. There was restaurants that turned into a meat shop to give you meat. Like, we were so blessed to have that, and we really never had to worry. I think that's just the neat part about the United States, is we owe a lot to the farmers and ranchers and to the packers that stood there, and they went out and still, even though they had to do social distancing, they slowed down their lines. I mean, it really cost them a lot to slow down their production, but they did it because they knew it was vital for people, and it's pretty awesome to see that sacrifice.
Excellent. Well said. So that said, I'm going to drop my pun here, right? If you have reservations about frozen beef, let it go.
Oh, goodness.
If this is your first time listening to the Meat Speak podcast, know that you can catch it across all of your major podcasting platforms, Google Play, Apple, Spotify, or simply by visiting certifiedangusbeef.com/podcast. And if you go there, you'll see Diana, myself, and Chef Tony Biggs staring right back at you. That one's my mother's favorite.
Oh, nice.
So until next time, we appreciate you tuning into the Meat Speak podcast. Meat scientist Diana Clark, Chef Tony Biggs. He's not here. He's down on Kiowa Island cooking.
I mean, come
on.
He says, on the beach.
He says he's cooking, but he's in South Carolina on a beach right now.
Yeah.
We know better, Chef. So when you come back with a tan, get ready, man.
Right.
So on behalf of the whole crew here at the world headquarters of premium beef, certified Angus beef, thanks for tuning in to the Meat Speak podcast.